This is a production of PBS Charlotte.
Just ahead on Carolina Impact.
Bringing business back to Charlotte's poorest neighborhoods. I'm Jeff Sonnier. Stick around. We'll tell you about the president's push for opportunity zones and how some neighborhoods are pushing back.
And it's called the Point in Time Count, counting the homeless in Charlotte face to face and hearing their stories firsthand.
I'm Todd Wallace, a volunteer program where tutors are spending their time and money. But the return on that investment is changing young lives across the city. That story's coming up.
Carolina Impact starts right now.
Carolina Impact, covering the issues, people, and places that impact you. This is Carolina Impact.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Amy Burkett. They call them opportunity zones, low-income areas where high-income investors can get a tax break if they're willing to help create new growth and new jobs. There are hundreds of opportunity zones here in the Carolinas. In fact, the idea came from South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, and the president recently stopped in Charlotte to drum up support for opportunity zones. But are they an opportunity for the neighbors struggling in those low-income areas, or for the rich developers trying to make a buck, or maybe both? Carolina Impact's Jeff Sonnier is in West Charlotte with more.
Yeah, this empty West Side shopping center is an example of what the president calls an opportunity zone, although it doesn't look like much of an opportunity. Mostly just boarded up and broken windows, padlocked doors. Inside one of the stores, you can still see what it used to be, a cooler full of Cokes, a counter full of smokes. Another failed business that the folks who live near here haven't seen open for years.
We want to disrupt what's broken. We want to really disrupt this place because none of the other stuff worked. No part of this country will ever again be ignored, neglected, overlooked, or abandoned.
One shot, one opportunity.
Together, we're bringing opportunity back to the places that need it most, to lift up underserved communities across the nation. Our tax cuts created nearly 9,000 opportunity zones. Again, Tim Scott, including more than 250 right here in North Carolina. So that's something. 250 in North Carolina.
For the president, opportunity zones are also a political opportunity, an appeal to inner city voters who may not like the rest of his politics, but also don't like what was happening before Trump to their inner city neighborhoods.
African American poverty has plummeted to the lowest rate ever recorded, the best numbers we've ever had. Remember, I used to say, what do you have to lose?
And while the president's on the podium here in Charlotte, his Secretary of Housing and Urban Development has the details.
You invest in areas that have been neglected and would continue to be neglected.
Areas like Charlotte's historic West End, a low-income opportunity zone which could use the boost of private dollars that those opportunity zone tax breaks are supposed to bring. It's where Johnson C. Smith University has been investing for years, extending its campus beyond the historic front gates to newer buildings on West Trade Street, right across the street from properties that have been left abandoned. The city is also spending millions in tax dollars here, building a new streetcar line, connecting West End to the wealth uptown that West Siders can see from their neighborhoods, but often don't feel a part of.
As you can see the gold line, you can see the rails coming up through here. What you can't see on the other side of the barricades over here, there's going to be a train stop.
Construction supervisor Tim Moore also points beyond the train stop to the brand new housing in old West End neighborhoods.
Back here they started building all these nice apartments and homes and rebuilding all this stuff, and this whole area, in my opinion, is really going to start changing over the next few years.
But all that change that the streetcar line is bringing now and that opportunity zones could bring in the future raises more concerns about longtime residents being pushed out or priced out.
One shot, do not miss your chance to blow. This opportunity comes one
How do you make sure that the neighborhoods themselves are connected with the planning, with the some of the decision making in these projects?
You know, people have misconceptions because of what the government has done in the past. We're not doing that anymore.
But when you're allowed to buy real estate and then you are land banking and not improving, that's not helpful.
Jatanya Adams is the founder of Historic West End Partners, and she says the opportunity zones are triggering a land grab in her neighborhood. Investors who want to buy up these properties for tax breaks, but don't want to help out the neighborhood itself.
We welcome investment. We welcome the best and the brightest to come and be a part that are geared towards the long game. The things that aren't here, the amenities, the shops, the restaurants, the services.
Investors are willing to take that first step. Are they willing to take the whole step, though, to truly improve the neighborhood they're investing in?
Helping startups, creating startups, bringing in established businesses, because this should be a no-brainer. But instead you don't. You meet your basic requirement to keep your tax shelter.
Opportunity zones are amazing what's happened. Tremendous amounts of money being put into areas that hadn't seen money for decades and decades.
But as that money flows into neighborhoods, some investors here in the audience are doing more to make sure it also flows back to neighbors.
We are taking 10% of every dollar that we raised in our fund, targeting towards community development initiatives in that community.
Clark Spencer's company, Grubb Properties, is planning new housing projects here in West End, and Spencer says if they make money, so will the West End itself.
We're capping returns to our investors, and anything above that cap we donate back to the communities.
Which is the kind of opportunity these opportunity zone neighborhoods like West End really need.
You're gonna make money and you're gonna save money regardless of what you do. So help us build something we can all be proud of together. That would be beautiful.
Now, historic West End and the West Side, not the only Charlotte opportunity zones. There are also large portions of the North Tryon Street corridor and North Graham Street also covered by the program. And also on the east side, several opportunity zones near Eastland Mall. Meanwhile, here on the West End, they're not expecting a repeat of what's happened on the South End because of either opportunity zones or the streetcar line, but that's okay. The message from West Enders to possible developers here, don't just look at our land, also look at our plan. Amy?
Thanks so much, Jeff. You'll find a link to the official question and answer page on opportunity zones from the IRS and a link to the homepage for Historic West End Partners and more on our website at pbscharlotte.org. Well, it happens once a year in January when it's often bitterly cold and conditions on living outside are dangerous. That's when volunteers count Charlotte's homeless. They hit the streets and learn about individual stories and situations. The work is vital in getting federal funding to help. Carolina Impact's Bea Thompson has more.
I'm so sorry to ask you these questions. I know you're cold.
It's a cold, pre-dawn morning in January, one that dozens of volunteers are experiencing as they fanned out across the city to count every individual in Charlotte's homeless community living on the streets or in a tent.
Are you okay with me recording your answers just on here?
The volunteers are trained to be as least invasive as possible, but for this data, in-person works best. It's the third year of Mecklenburg County's point-in-time count, when it conducts survey interviews with everyone experiencing homelessness on that night. And for the third year, the volunteers and providers are using an electronic app to capture information, streamlining the process for everyone and improving data accuracy for better results. The count affects the federal dollars we receive to help this population.
We have to do this every year because of federal assistance we get from HUD for providing emergency shelter, for providing permanent housing assistance. We also go above and beyond to collect information that can help inform local decision-making right here at home.
Even for the volunteers, the harsh realities of the streets are not easy to hear.
I guess this is on a street or a sidewalk in an abandoned building.
Charlotte has been overcrowded with people, but not overcrowded with housing. And that's something that we desperately need in order to help this population.
In January 2019, in the last point-in-time count, there were 1,700 people, a number the coordinators acknowledge is an undercount. Yet in December, those numbers showed around 3,500 people were actively homeless. The lack of affordable housing contributes to both housing instability and homelessness. In Mecklenburg County, there is a 27,000 unit gap for households at or below 30% of the area median income. Housing that is affordable is the primary solution to reducing housing instability and ending homelessness.
If a person is going to pay for rent, not be cost burden, the most they can afford is around $300. But the fair market rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Charlotte is at $900.
Why would you not go to the shelter? Ban the environment.
It'll take a second to warm up, I think.
I've seen a number of men and women in homeless camps scattered in what few remaining vacant lots exist around uptown. I've talked to veterans at the men's shelter who hold vouchers but aren't able to get housing.
On this early morning, volunteers from the community and various support agencies are getting their instructions on the questions to ask, how to log that information, and how to provide immediate help.
I'm gonna say good morning, guys. This is Madeline Urban Ministry Center. I'm gonna just kind of introduce it that way, so then that way they know I'm a safe person.
For a lot of folks, this might be the first conversation they have with someone in a long time. And we can connect winter weather related items like sleeping bags, tents, and tarps, provide a little bit more comfort until housing can become available.
So do you think you've been out here for 1 or 2 or 3 years?
And as Charlotte experiences a boom in upscale housing development, finding affordable housing, even with full-time employment, is out of reach for many.
Numbers are numbers, but when you actually talk to people and you meet them and you understand their story, I think it provides a little bit more incentive and a sense of urgency to get them housed.
They already sent me a case manager with them already.
Wow. When do you think you became homeless? What year?
2016.
The message to these volunteers is stark. Thousands in Charlotte sleep in the cold each night. But what can be done about it? How does the city change the picture and the circumstances? And that's the reason they're here.
It takes both the public and the private sector working together to increase housing stock that's available and then target it for folks who most need it, and that's for the folks with the least income in our community.
Do you ever have family staying with you, or are you just by yourself tonight?
How we can do that is if we get more landlords to just open up the door for this population.
I feel increasing levels of responsibility, and I feel sad that there aren't more resources available for our neighbors who are in most urgent need.
And for the people who gather the information and watch the numbers increase, the effort is about more than sheer numbers. It also puts a face to what homelessness is in our community, that there are people out there with income. Everyone is not just homeless out on the street, on a bench, or in a park. For Carolina Impact, I'm B. Thompson reporting.
Thanks so much, B. Last year's official count was over 1,700. 277 had families with children. Well, have you ever heard the saying, kindergarten to second graders learn to read, but third graders and beyond must read to learn? There are lots of local groups working to help all students read on a third grade level on time. The Augustine Literacy Project is one of those groups making a positive impact. Volunteers learn how to be a literacy tutor. Once trained, they're matched up with a child who needs extra help. Carolina Impact's Todd Wallace has more.
Tell me the name of the letter and the sound they make. Ready?
S.
Good.
To understand what learning looks and sounds like,
good.
Just take a peek inside this small room at Oakhurst STEAM Academy in Charlotte.
Crips, crust.
8-year-old second grader Trinity Crockett is working with tutor Ellen Babb as she pronounces a whole list of letters and words.
I was making words, and it was a magnet board, and I was making other words on a piece of paper.
But I see a big jump forward in her with putting together consonant sounds and blends, and yeah, I see a lot of progress with her. Okay, you ready to read?
Ellen has been tutoring Trinity since the beginning of the school year.
Piggy, let's play catch.
She's been volunteering for about 5 years.
She's the 5th student that I've worked with.
Bonk, 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 bonk.
And they all have such great qualities. They're all intelligent and clever in their own ways. We're gonna do some words we've already done before, and then we're gonna do something new.
But they needed help, and tutoring is Ellen's way of giving back. She retired from banking and finance, but still had her eye on investing, albeit of a different kind.
People helped me along the way, so I want to see what I can do. And I think that literacy and reading and the ability to everything, write out a job application, all those things that go with literacy are so critical. So I found Augustine Literacy Project and took the training.
We utilize multiple pathways to the brain, which helps a child remember and retain what they're learning. And it speaks to learners of all different types.
Allison Hauser is the executive director for the Augustine Literacy Project. It was founded in 1994 in Chapel Hill and now has 15 locations in North and South Carolina and Texas. The mission is to improve the reading, writing, and spelling skills of low-income students who struggle with literacy by providing free, long-term, one-on-one instruction from trained volunteer tutors. Those volunteers pay for their own training, $250 for 40 intense hours. They create individualized lesson plans for every student, and each tutor commits to at least 60 one-hour sessions.
An Augustine tutoring session is very active. You'll see a child reading and tracing letters on textured surface. You might see them skywriting sight words, and repetition is also an important part of our lesson.
This is that word we talked about where it has 2 sounds, right? It could
Augustine Literacy Project has been in Charlotte for 15 years. In that time, 400 tutors have helped 800 students. Students are given a pre-assessment and post-assessment to track their progress.
That was a big improvement from the first time to the second time.
And when students are tutored is every bit as important as how they are tutored.
The Augustine Literacy Project focuses on students in 1st and 2nd grade because at that age, students learn to read. But that's important because by 3rd grade, the organization says students read to learn.
There's a lot of research out there that shows that if children are not reading on grade level by 3rd grade, they're 4 times more likely to leave school without a diploma. And if a child has lived in poverty for a year or more, that rate is 6 times greater.
And according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, more than 60% of students are not reading proficiently when they enter 4th grade. Hauser says the good news is that 96% of proficient 3rd grade readers will graduate from high school. And no student knows that more than senior Constance Knox.
So in school, I have a 3.6 GPA. I try to keep my grades up. I do all my work, especially taking AP courses. So I've been taking an AP class since 10th grade.
But to reach this level of academic success, Constance was tutored by a volunteer with the Augustine Literacy Project in 2nd grade, after her grandmother was told Constance had been struggling with literacy.
We do see problems with her, and we don't know where her situation would end up.
Constance and her tutor worked hard. So hard, she says she no longer needs special education, has been accepted to every college where she has applied, and is now an avid reader.
I will go to the bookstore and buy tons of books and read them all because that's how much I love reading now.
Ellen Babb says she and Trinity are also making great progress. But tutoring isn't Trinity's favorite part.
Sometimes she comes to lunch with me. You are our friend.
For me, it's just spending time together and working together and seeing the progress that she makes. I don't know how to describe it. It's probably the best thing I've done in my whole life. I love it.
Which means that while the tutors for Augustine Literacy Project focus on reading and writing, they're also building something else: relationships.
Todd joins me in the studio now, and it looks like an amazing program. But one of the questions that I have is, how can a student get involved in this program?
So the organization partners with Title I schools. Title I schools are those schools that have a large concentration of low-income students. Those students must also qualify for a free lunch or a reduced price lunch. And they also have to be reading approximately a year below their grade level, and then they qualify.
How long does a tutor stay with a child?
Generally 60 hours or a year or a year and a half, whichever comes first. It usually takes a year or a year and a half to actually meet the 60 hours.
How many CMS schools are involved?
So if you go on the website, you'll see 21 schools, which is fantastic. Of those 21 schools, you'll have 13 which are called partners. Now, partner is a school that has a representative that is directly close to the organization. And so what happens is, if a student leaves that partner school and then goes to another school, they want that tutor to follow that student. So even if that new school is not necessarily a partner, they still will consider that school participating with the organization to help the student.
So there's no gap in learning
There's
for the young person?
There's no gap. They want the consistency. That's what they must have.
Tell me about some of the successes that the program has seen over the years.
They really have been tracking this, and they're trying to get more data, but so far this is very, very impressive regarding the statistics and the success of this program. Executives say, on average, students who have been tutored 30 or more times, listen to this, had their spelling scores increased by almost a full grade level. Slight sight word recognition, those are words that are common or words that show up repeatedly, rose an average of 24%, and then fluency and comprehension, which of course is most important, increased by 1.7 grade levels. So they could be 1 year behind, and by the end of their tutoring actually be slightly ahead.
Leapfrogging ahead.
Exactly.
That's great information. Todd, thanks so much for telling us about this story.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Many arts organizations in our area are struggling with funding these days. The Arts and Science Council plans on asking Mecklenburg County for $12 million to help. The request comes on the heels of November's vote that rejected a tax increase, which would have benefited the arts organizations. Carolina Impact's Jason Terzis shows us where things stand and introduces us to the new man in charge.
Snow doesn't fall very often in Charlotte, but a little visit from Old Man Winter didn't keep people from coming to the Charlotte Museum of History earlier this month. On February 8th, the museum, along with several other venues in town, hosted Connect with Culture Days, all free and open to the public.
This is a place that we have never been to before, and we thought it would just be a great opportunity to come and see the museum and all the activities that are going on in the museum today.
The 6th annual event showcased everything from paintings by local artists to photography and tons of kids' activities.
I'm enjoying learning in this environment how you can present that history and that culture, especially to a younger audience, through the arts and crafts.
So what's happening today is we have 60 different experiences that are happening around Mecklenburg County. It gives you a great sort of sampling or taste of what's happening throughout the year.
One unique showcase at the Museum of History was the performance of klezmer music, which originated with the Jewish people of Eastern Europe.
Klezmer music has undergone a revival.
The kids are out of school, and this is just a great opportunity for us to come out, spend time together as a family, and learn about what's in our city.
Heading up Charlotte's Arts and Science Council since last June is Jeep Bryant. He spent a lifetime working in the arts, appearing in all sorts of plays and musicals while growing up, and always comfortable in front of a crowd or on camera.
When you get to junior high, you really arrived, or so it seems. Everything's new and big and well, maybe a little scary.
If you go way back, as a kid, I was on stage at Children's Theater and also Theater Charlotte. So I know that the investments the community made way back then benefited me.
Jeep graduated from South Meg High School and UNC Chapel Hill, earning a degree in broadcast journalism, later going to work as a news anchor and reporter down the road in Spartanburg, where he went by the name of Ron.
Good morning. It is Friday, September 11th, 1987. I'm Ron Bryant, and this is a special edition of Eyewitness News Daybreak.
Jeep even spent some time working here at WTVI PBS Charlotte.
I had the good fortune to serve on the WTVI board during the 1990s.
During the time that Jeep was chair at WTVI, we had an outstanding year.
After leaving television, Jeep went to work in corporate communications.
Tonight, we honor the best. First Union Director of Corporate Communications, Jeep Bryant.
Jeep then headed off to Pittsburgh and later New York City, where he served as sponsorship director for the Tony Awards and was instrumental in expanding the National High School Musical Theater Awards, known as the Jimmies.
When I was working on the National High School Musical Theater Awards, that was really the time that I reconnected with Charlotte in a meaningful way, because I did work directly with WTVI on the Blumey Awards videos.
But even as he made the decision to come back home to Charlotte to lead the Arts and Science Council, Jeep knew that it would be a challenge.
We have wind at our back because the city is growing, we're adding jobs, but there is still so much yet to be done.
Just 5 months after taking over as president, Mecklenburg County voters shot down a quarter-cent tax increase proposal that would have benefited the arts, parks, and groups like the ASC.
The language on the ballot, which simply said, would you like your taxes to go up, but could not say the benefit, the value that that would have had. We were at many of the polling places during early voting and on election day, and when voters would say to us, I'm not going to support this and here's why, it often was the uncertainty over the allocations over a long period of time.
The ASC supports dozens of nonprofit arts organizations throughout the county, but may not be able to keep doing so without additional funding. The ASC says it needs to raise $5 million additional by June to avoid a 50% cut in operating grants it gives to arts organizations.
So we're feeling that the clock is ticking. We need to figure this out as a community. And there are multiple avenues that we're pursuing now.
One of those avenues is asking county commissioners for more funding to the tune of $12 million, a 131% increase over the $5.2 million in local funds ASC received this fiscal year.
It was encouraging to me to see how many community leaders, leaders from the business community, the nonprofit community, recognize the need to step up and support arts and culture in a greater way.
The city and county is at a crossroads when it comes to the arts. Which way the road leads is up to community leaders, as well as individual and corporate donors.
How do we make sure that the kids who are growing up in Mecklenburg County today, regardless of what neighborhood they're in, what their zip code is, have equal access to arts education, to cultural opportunities? That's the opportunity that we're trying to seize.
Without the necessary funding, Connect with Culture Days and other free local events may be a thing of the past.
Yeah, no, I think it's vital. It's absolutely vital to the life of the city.
We're all feeling that there are deadlines approaching. We need to figure this out over the course of the next 2 or 3 months.
He may be new to the job, but not to Charlotte, and perhaps that will be the strength the ASC needs to navigate these uncertain times. For Carolina Impact, I'm Jason Terzis reporting.
Thanks so much, Jason, and welcome back to Charlotte, Jeep. To give you some perspective, the Arts and Science Council began in 1958 with a goal of supporting and sustaining art through just 8 organizations and a $68,000 budget. Today, ASC serves to give cultural experiences across the community through the awarding of $13.7 million in grants to artists, organizations, and schools. The goal is to engage all residents in a vibrant cultural life. Well, that's all we have time for this evening. Thanks so much for your time. We always appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you back here again next time on Carolina Impact. Good night, my friends.
Production of PBS Charlotte.